I imagine it would have been easy, following the success of Prison Architect, for Introversion Software to double down on making big, systems-driven games they could sell early access to in order to help fund development. It's clearly been lucrative for them. 2 million copies of Prison Architect sold is nothing to sneer at, but Introversion has decided to go in another direction. Instead of another sprawling simulation that takes 5 years to build, they've released a short, linear, experimental game they call Sombre. In Sombre, you play as a cave explorer who wants to find his way out of a labyrinthian cave system, and to do so he uses a LiDAR scanner and headset. Basically, the LiDAR gun fires out little lasers that report back to the gun on how far they had to travel, allowing you to map out the entire cave surrounding you with nothing more than a bunch of dots. The closer the dot, the hotter its color, giving you a sense of bridges, stalactites, and stalagmites without actually seeing any of them. There's an immediate temptation to frame Sombre as a poor man's Unfinished Swan, given that both explore shooting out particle effects to discover the space that surrounds you. But while they both have similar mechanics, they're employed in fundamentally different ways. Unfinished Swan uses its monochrome setup to play with perspective and let you delight in the discovery of a doorway or environmental object. The joy is in the unveiling itself. In contrast, Sombre is more interested in making you think through the abstraction. Since everything is rendered as just dots, you can effectively see through every wall and every object, and parsing the movement of dots as a 3D rendered scene in your head is sometimes more taxing than you might expect, especially in really windy cave passages early in the game. The joy here is mapping the space out in your head, with the LiDAR adjustments being there to basically let you control how much data you want to have to process in your head at one time. So the two games have similar ideas, but radically different implementations. There's also no denying that the game is gorgeous. Introversion has always specialized in looking at the world through some sort of neon abstraction, whether that's the computer terminals in Uplink, the Tron-like world inside of a computer of Darwinia, or the cold but vibrant map of a NORAD war room in DEFCON. And in Sombre, the LiDAR dots really do give you a distinct look. At some points it feels like you're walking through an interactive screensaver from the 90s. At other points doing a burst scan feels like watching an old VGA game render a scene, but it's a scene that you can walk into. There's something supremely cool about that, and it's something no other game has given me. So when the game is all about that stuff, it works really, really well. Mapping a complex cave system with a LiDAR scanner, and then mapping those dots out into a 3D space in your head, working your way through various chambers and caverns, and playing with this awesome rendering tech all come together to form a memorable game about exploration. But then there are the points where the game's not so much about that stuff, and that's where things take a bit of a nosedive. The problem, more than anything, is tone. Despite the rockin' visual aesthetic, Sombre's tone is all over the place. There are times the game wants to be outright scary and horrific, throwing shrieking computer noises, visual glitches, and flashes of dying figures all around. Then other times it wants you to soak in the beauty of the cave, and even play some twangy folk music while you drift on a boat under some bioluminescent plants. Then, other times, Sombre decides you should be sad because it threw up some narration on the screen that has sad words in it. But none of it flows or feels natural. You just cross through a trigger volume and events happen that smack you in the face and say, "You are feeling this way now!" Then they end and you go back to exploring as you were. These set pieces should accentuate or underline what we're already feeling from the core gameplay loop of exploring, but instead they're totally apart from the act of actually playing the game, which makes them feel like they're coming out of nowhere. There was, I think, one bit where the exploration felt like it tied in with the tone. Eventually you discover an altar, and doing a LiDAR burst in that room reveals shadows cast against the wall of people who aren't there. that's the stuff the game needs more of, incorporating tone into the act of exploring the space itself. Without it, your exploration feels totally separate from the signposted feelings the developers clearly want you to have. Unfortunately, none of this is helped by the writing, which is... it's bad. As you progress through the game, you'll receive narration by the player character in the form of on-screen text, usually to either inform you about the history of the different sections of the cave, or to lament his current predicament. And the problem is that they appear so infrequently and are so short and curt that any of the history spiels feel like exposition dumps, and any of the character stuff is kept vague to preserve a twist that I won't spoil, but... well, you can see it coming about 15 minutes into the game, and it is revealed in a super awkward way that largely undermines a lot of what had come before. Overall, one gets the sense that what they were going for was almost a gothic horror-y Edgar Allan Poe sort of thing. You know, not monster popping in from out of the frame jump scare terror, but a slow burn of longing, guilt, regret, and grief that manifest as the various scary visions and horrific goings-on in the cave. But to buy into that, we have to be in the headspace of the protagonist and understand why he has those emotions, and we're never really given the opportunity to do that. If that's what they were going for, helping the protagonist escape this cave should have been a metaphorical journey of helping him grapple with those emotions, or at least watching him succumb to them. Instead, it feels like we're exploring a cave with LiDAR because it was a cool design mechanic the developers wanted to explore, and it is cool. And the story bits are there to convince you that the game is more than just a neat exploration mechanic. And what's sad is that the exploration stuff was fine on its own. It was a cool looking game that made me think spatially in some new ways. That's rare. There's something unique about knowing where you're going as long as you're always moving forward, but getting immediately kind of lost when you turn around because your LiDAR points only reflect one side of every surface. It's disorienting and requires you to sort of realign the picture of the caves in your head, and I dig that. And that sort of interesting, unique experience should have been enough. But by adding a threadbare story that ends with a cringy climax, by trying to act like there were themes and ideas at play when the gameplay barely intersects with them, Scanner Sombre extends its reach far beyond its grasp. I can see a version of this game that's all about exploration without any story, and it's probably fantastic. And I can see a version of this game that better integrates its thematic ideas with its mechanics and is a spooky gothic horror piece that everyone loves. But the version of the game we have is the worst of both worlds. It detracts from its mechanics to tell its story, and its story is simply badly told. It doesn't have the emotional heft it thinks it does, and when it comes to the big reveal at the end, everything falls flat. Introversion is a story developer with a long history of making games, and taking a risk on something like this instead of playing it more safe is absolutely something to be applauded. We need more developers taking creative risks like this, not fewer. But there's a reason they're called creative risks. Sometimes they pan out, and sometimes they don't. And as beautiful as the game is to look at, and as cool as its mechanics are to toy with, its mishandling of tone and its sloppy writing makes Scanner Sombre one of the risks that maybe didn't pan out so well. For the record, I'm really bummed out that this is the first time I've covered Introversion on the show. They've been doing indie development since I was in high school, for God's sakes, and Uplink is one of my favorite hacking sims ever. Heck, we had DEFCON matches that would last all day in our dorms. The office mode in that game is really neat, and it's something that I wish more games did. As whiny as I have been about Scanner Sombre, I really do look forward to whatever they make next, and seriously, bursting in this game is super fun.